Welcome back to the Take Me Later podcast. I am your host, Noah Rubin. This is episode 59, and today Rhett Bauer is going to join me to talk about the Nuggets, the Thunder, and the Pacers. So let's go ahead and get into it. And quickly, before I bring Rhett in, I just wanted to remind you that support for this Fantasy Basketball International podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore thanks to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe so you can trim with confidence. Treat your wrinkleberries and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com to get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FBI20. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming, no surprises. We know every dude gets the heebie-jeebies when it's time for a close shave down under, especially when using the wrong tools. That's precisely why Manscaped is my go-to for those delicate spots. Trust me, this trimmer will be your crown jewel's new best buddy. Again, you get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FBI20 at manscaped.com. Show your balls some love and feel free as a dove. As I said, I'm bringing in Rhett Bauer to join me, and today we are going to be talking about the Nuggets, the Thunder, and his Indiana Pacers. Rhett, the last time we did this specific kind of series last year, I think you were on the second episode because it wasn't as great of a season for the Pacers, but now you're the second to last episode because it was a heck of a year for your Indiana Pacers. How does it feel as a fan to just enjoy that conference finals run?
I mean, honestly, just kind of along for the ride. It was certainly an overachievement to get to the conference finals, regardless of the path to get there. I think, you can nitpick it all you want, but they still beat who was in front of them, even if the people in front of them were a bit depleted. But no, it was a pretty fun season and pretty fun postseason. But the thing I just kept going back to, which is relevant to our discussion, is just we did that entire postseason run with neither of our two lottery picks from the last 2 years, from the two seasons of being bad leading up to this one where we overachieved. So nothing but an upward trajectory over here on my side of things, even though I don't think expectations should be conference finals again heading into next year.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get into it a little bit. We'll do the Pacers after we talk about the Nuggets and Thunder, but they'll still make moves this summer, which is something that you have kind of said that the Hawks should have done a few years ago when they made their conference finals run, is to not be complacent, make moves, improve, do that. Don't just be, hey, we made it to the conference finals. Next year we're going to be back.
Yeah, I mean, it's an over you were considered to have overachieved for a reason. It's because that was not expected of you. So why would you run back the same group that was not expected to do as well as they did? It's not because the group as a collective was more talented than you thought. It was mostly or probably just the path it took to get there, which I think is especially true for your Hawks a couple of years ago. I think there's a slightly different argument for the Pacers, but we got a couple more legit contenders to get to before my Pacers come up, which is going to take up a lot of my time, I imagine.
Perfect. We'll make sure we'll just breeze through these other guys. We kind of know what to expect from a fantasy standpoint for the most part with these teams. So we're not going to go super in depth on Jokic. We're not going to go super in depth on SGA because, frankly, y'all should know. But just talking about the Nuggets as a team, they went 57-25 this year, finished second in the West, lost in 7 games to Minnesota in the second round after beating the Lakers round 1. They have picks 28 and 56 in this upcoming draft. And for each team throughout this series, offseason series, kind of giving them what is their team direction. The Nuggets are a proven contender. They obviously won the championship last year and were up 20 in game 7 in the second round. Probably a lot of people thought they were going back to the finals this year, and then all of a sudden everything fell apart. Rhett, how do you feel about this Nuggets team?
I feel like this year, it kind of felt like they won the title last year, which was fantastic, but it still kind of felt like they should have done something this summer. It's like it's hard to say that because you just won a title, so why would you break something up? But then the way that this season ended, losing like that at home, in what is supposed to be one of the bigger home court advantages to lose like that. I think there's going to be significant changes, whether it's things that they control themselves, such as like trading a Michael Porter Jr., or something like KCP leaving for more money to go somewhere else that can pay him more. I mean, Jokic and Murray are what they are. Peyton Watson and Christian Brown obviously stepping up and hopefully being a bit ready to contribute more if Coach Michael Malone lets them. But it's just gonna be fascinating to see what a team like that, who had such a great season, lost in that fashion, but obviously had the success that they did to get there over the last 2 years. It's to see what they would do. I think that's going to be really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and a couple of things you mentioned we will talk about, but the moves that they made in free agency or last summer were losing Bruce Brown, and that's not especially with how much of an impact he made for them last year, not exactly what they want to do. But we'll talk about fantasy. We'll start with Jokic just because it makes sense, and we'll play a quick game here that will also probably do the same thing with SGA. You're doing a startup draft, startup dynasty. You're on the clock. Pick one. Are you taking Wemby or Jokic? If it's those two, which one are you taking?
Wemby.
Luka or Jokic?
Luka.
SGA or Jokic?
SGA.
Okay. Halliburton or Jokic?
Jokic. That's the line for me. Jokic is at 4. I just think, all of the guys that you mentioned ahead of him have volume and just like ridiculous points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, relatively low turnovers, and I guess not for Luka really, but then just like high volume, relatively efficient scoring. Halliburton has a little bit less volume, obviously way less rebounds, way less blocks. So he's just like statistically in a slightly different position. But I wouldn't really argue with somebody if somebody wanted to take Halliburton over Jokic either.
And is there anybody else in that conversation?
I don't think so. Let me pull up my my most recent. Yeah, I don't think so. I think Jokic should be 4 or 5. I think that's the tier. I don't think you can take Tatum over Jokic for me. Ant Edwards, LaMelo, Chet, Scotty Barnes, those are the guys that are kind of probably in that range, and I don't think you can take any of them over Jokic at this point either.
I agree with you. I was just curious what you thought. That's exactly how I'm working on updated rankings. It would be Jokic at 4 right there, with Halliburton at 5. So in a redraft league, are you taking him at 1 next year, or do you think 2, 3? What are you kind of thinking?
I think ultimately, I think that Wembanyama will be the number 1 player, but I think I would probably still take Jokic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Spurs are going to be that good to where it eliminates the shutdown risk. And I think that there's a lot of, I don't know. It would probably be way more fun to take Victor. So I would I say that, and then I would probably take Victor 1 if I was actually on the clock. Which, if you'll recall, last summer in my startup for the weekly league, I took Wembanyama first overall. I immediately traded him, and I regret it, but it was spicy.
I think you said, I think we're back.
Okay.
You said it was spicy then, and then it froze. Yeah.
Yes, spicy then, but not now.
Yeah. Now, what was that trade package again?
I traded Wembanyama, Bilal Coulibaly, and a couple other prospecty types for Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, and Siakam. It didn't work out for me. I lost in like the second round of the playoffs.
That's just how fantasy works, isn't that so much fun? But I just needed you to repeat the trade on camera just because it's funny. But
I got it.
With Jamal Murray, obviously we know what he is. He's very, very good and steps up in big moments, hits big shots, but that hasn't always translated into, I guess, regular season respect even, but really just like fantasy production, because he's not a guy who's going to make the All-Star game, All NBA, but he's one of the best point guards in the league, I would say. Played 59 games this year, 65 the year before. Has obviously had plenty of injuries recently. How much do you trust him in fantasy? Like knowing that, yeah, he's probably gonna have a few nagging injuries that have missed a few games here and there, and who knows how healthy other like knee issues may be that may limit his minutes at all. Like, how much trust do you have in Jamal Murray?
Yeah, I think I think I'm fine with Murray as a player. Obviously, 57 games is underwhelming, but I think that if you put the bar at like 65 to 70 games, and he
Mm-hmm.
does what he did this year at about he was a third round player. He's
Yep.
36th in 9 cat. Like you can't really argue with 21 points, 4 boards, 6.5 assists, a steal, half a block, 48, 85 splits. Like you can't really
No.
ask for much more than that, honestly. It looks like this it might have defaulted to 8 cat actually now that I'm looking at Basketball Monster, but regardless, I don't think there's any concerns with Jamal, even though I could understand, um, with Denver seemingly taking the regular season a lot more serious this year, if you wanted to argue that he could be like the 57 game mark is roughly where he's going to be just because they're going to rest players, then I think you could, okay, I can't really argue with that much. But I also think that if you start getting into conversations about what might happen in March and April, like
Mm-hmm.
that's tough to really factor in for dynasty evaluation at this point.
Definitely, definitely. He I had a whole point. Oh, he also doesn't, I guess, have that really early ADP where you're looking at, I guess, heading into this year, a guy like a Kawhi and Anthony Davis and Paul George, guys who've missed a ton of time, but you still have to kind of take them pretty early. It's like, I'm not really comfortable taking him there. And obviously it worked out this year. With Jamal Murray, you're not having to take him really in the first few rounds. And so he's
Hmm.
still going to give you really, really good production from where you get him.
Yeah.
Um, with Michael Porter Jr., we kind of know what he has been the last few years. Obviously, he had that one season that was just unreal, and then it's been pretty solid. It was top
Hmm.
75 this year. Most of the value coming from points, threes, and rebounds. Averaged a career high 1.5 assists per game this year. Just mind-boggling stats right there. Um, but you mentioned earlier, like, could he be traded? I've seen his name thrown around in some rumors. Do you think a potential change of scenery could open up his fantasy game? Maybe turn him, like, assuming he's traded to a team that uses him more than Denver does, gives him a little bit more free reign to shoot even more of a green light than what Denver gives him, I guess. Um, does that vault him into potentially being a top 50 guy?
I think the only thing that's going to vault him into being top 50 is his defensive stats. Because I don't see a situation better than what Denver asks him to
Mm-hmm.
do. He takes he takes 13 shots a game, and that's basically it. Like like you said, he doesn't do very much else. And funny enough, I think if you combined his assists, steals, and blocks, it's under 3. And I'm not sure how many other players in the league played 32 minutes or more, if you could say that for. But so as a rookie and as a rookie in his 31 minutes, he was at point 0.7 steals, point 0.9 blocks, which was awesome. And then he hasn't really gotten back to those kinds of levels, so it's kind of hard to expect that to jump. But I think any team that's trading for Michael Porter Jr. is going to use him in about the same ways. I don't think there's much off the bounce. I don't think there's much like I don't know how he's going to get better shots than what he gets in Denver, right? I think
Right.
the only thing you could point to there would probably be if Jamal Murray were more healthy, then you could argue that he would have less on his plate on the defensive side of things, but or on like being the focal point of defenses guarding Denver. But even that, I'm not even sure that matters that much. So I think Michael Porter Jr. kind of is what he is, and I think that will be the case whether he's on Denver or somewhere else.
Yeah, no, that's entirely fair. I'm trying to fantasize a scenario where he ends up on a team that there isn't really one in the NBA that I can think of that is just really bad. You know what? I'll say if there's for some reason it happens where he's traded to Washington and they're just like, hey, just go chuck shots with. I don't even know what the roster would look like for MPJ to end up in Washington, but go chuck 20 shots a game, see what happens. I don't know. Maybe that, but that would probably destroy his efficiency. Maybe even lower his assists at that point. But
yeah, I mean, Kuzma coming through with 22, 7, 4 with 1.2 combined defensive stats and lower efficiency. Like you'd probably see something like that, but there's no way in this world to me that Michael Porter Jr. gets to 4 assists a game. There's just no way. He just does not look to do that. And I think asking him to do it, like like Kyle Kuzma, ball handler, Michael Porter Jr., play finisher, and I think that that's about right. And so, even in a situation like that, I do think it would be exactly like what you said: get 20 shots up, not necessarily create for others.
Yep. And then, so obviously, guys like Aaron Gordon, KCP, very important to what Denver does. But the intriguing younger prospects are Peyton Watson and Christian Brown. Are you a believer in either or both of them? Just kind of looking at them, Peyton Watson, they both started 4 games this year. Watson averaged 11.8 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.5 assists, a steal, 1.5 blocks, and 1.5 threes in those 4 starts. Christian Brown averaged 8.8 points, 3.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.8 steals, and 1.3 threes in his 4 starts. How do you feel about either or both of them?
Yeah, I think Christian Brown is one of those guys that is just he's just a rotation player. I think in like a 30 team league, it's probably worth having him because he's going to play on a contending team that doesn't have a lot of financial flexibility, a bunch of roster flexibility. Like a player like him on a rookie contract who just plays minutes is useful. Peyton Watson, I am intrigued with. He's it's tough to know what to make of him because he does a lot of the same stuff Aaron Gordon does, and they can't really play together, I don't think. But Aaron Gordon is arguably the Nuggets' second most important player most of this year. So I don't see any way that gets adjusted unless Peyton Watson somehow ends up being better than a 33% 3-point shooter. But I do think Peyton Watson is still someone worth having for sure because he's 21, turning 22 in September, so it'll be right around the start of the season. 6'8" with that kind of athleticism and shot blocking instincts. I went through and grabbed the top 26. I meant to do like 25 games of his for minutes played, and he was about 19 minutes a game. 1.1 blocks, 0.6 steals. Like he's going to be a defensive playmaker, but I do wonder about like what else does he do in that really blows up his fantasy game, and does that happen on a team like Denver?
Yeah, no, that's entirely fair. In my mind, the way that it could work is it's probably not something that happens next year, even potentially the year after that. The earliest would be, okay, Aaron Gordon ends up not in Denver anymore, and Peyton Watson's able to slide in, or KCP's not in Denver anymore, Christian Brown's able to slide in. Those are probably the only 2 scenarios in which they're standard league guys, or an injury. I guess that's another scenario. But where they have kind of permanent value would have to be that one or 2 of those starters leave, and the rest of the team kind of stays intact in a way that Jokic is feeding them easy buckets. I was also clicking away while you were talking and looking up, just because you brought it up, and now I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I had to look it up. There was 4 players this year that averaged 1.5 or fewer assists and played more than 30 minutes per game. And it was Michael Porter Jr., Do you want to even like throw a guess out for the other three?
Kelly Oubre would be one. I don't even know if he hit the minutes threshold there.
No. Kelly Oubre's one. That was a great guess.
Kelly Oubre would be one. Neesmith, I don't think he hit the minutes load.
No, not Neesmith.
I'm gonna. It's probably some bit. It was Rudy Gobert one. He was probably
Rudy
over two.
Gobert is one.
Was he really?
No,
All
and
right.
actually, like looking through this over the past few years, he is a consistent guy on this list, as is Kelly Oubre and Michael Porter Jr. But yeah, one more.
Oh man.
I don't think you'll guess this one. You'd have to be looking it up to guess this one.
Jabari Smith is probably close to making it, but also I don't know for sure. What was the minutes threshold? Was it 30?
30 minutes.
30 minutes a
And
game. Okay.
This guy was at 32.7.
Okay. I don't know.
Just so you
No,
know,
I
the
don't know.
Jabari Smith guess, he was at 1.6 assists, so he didn't qualify. But that
Gosh
that
darn
is
it,
an unreal
that's
guess.
so close. Yeah, I don't know. We don't need to hold everybody up on
no,
this.
that's fair. Sadiq Bey was the final one.
Oh, dang it! I was thinking, I was like, okay, who's a chucker wing that dang it.
3 out of 4,
That's
and
not
then
bad.
also
And
a
an
guy that
honorable
was right
mention.
there. Yeah, I mean that's
Nice.
goodness
I feel good
gracious,
at
that was impressive. Yeah.
Wow.
But we'll go ahead and move on to the Thunder because pretty much everyone else in Denver, unless you want to talk about Hunter Tyson or Julian Strauth or whatever, we'll just move on to the Thunder.
Shout out Julian Strother. That's a guy in a 30-team
yeah.
league. That's a guy I would be just like poking around. So here's the thing: you can't ask about him directly because if you go up and ask somebody, it's like, hey, what is your price on Julian Strother? It's probably like, okay, like if someone's interested in him, then there might be a reason to hold him. It's like, what are you going to send for that? So just like be a little subtle and ask around about Julian Strother, see what you can get.
That the art of the deal right there, because anytime anybody randomly asks me about somebody, I immediately pull up Twitter and like just scroll through and be like, did something happen that I'm
What
missing?
did I miss?
Why are you asking me about, for example, Julian Strother? Like, did he just have a really good game and that's why you're asking me about him?
You
But
can't start a conversation with Julian Strother, otherwise that person is never going to trade them.
You have to, I don't know, maybe you throw in Julian Strother.
Right, there you go. That's it.
Fine. With the Thunder, they also went 57-25. They had the tiebreaker, so they were first in the West. They lost in 6 games to Dallas in the second round after sweeping the Pelicans in round 1. They have pick 12 this year. For their team direction, I put that they are a young contending team. I think had Josh Giddey not been on the floor earlier in the series, there's a chance that they would have beat Dallas in that series. But they'll learn. They're still incredibly young, incredibly talented. They're going to add another lottery pick this year. Do I need to ask your thoughts about this, or is this just kind of Sam Presti is the elite dynasty fantasy manager?
I think Sam Presti is what a lot of dynasty managers think they are, and Sam Presti's actually pulled it off in real life for sure. Just picks, just nothing but picks. I don't care about the elite talent. If if a lot of the people that are in the leagues that we're in were playing this game, they would have traded Shea already because he is over 25 years old. And probably would have gotten 6 more first round picks and been psyched about it. It's the perpetual job security. Just wait for the draft picks to come in. No, I mean the Thunder are incredible. They're in just an unbelievable position with Shea, J-Dub, and Chet. I mean, you can basically. I mean, to me, I think you can all but guarantee that Josh Giddey is not on the Thunder by opening night would be my guess. Because Cason Wallace just fits so much better in there, and that's not even getting into the type of player that they could get if they decided to push their chips in. I don't know who that player would be. I've seen a lot of names. Apparently, Isaiah Hartenstein is a big old free agent target, which is fascinating. But I can't wait to see what the Thunder do.
Yeah, there's also rumors they were looking to trade up to get Donovan Clingan. So apparently they want some sort of backup center for Chet.
Might as well.
Yeah, I mean, get somebody with just like a big body to foul people so Chet can get a break. I think that's not a bad strategy. We'll play the same game with SGA that we did with Jokic. So you're on the clock. Wemby or SGA?
Wimby, but I think that like if you wanted to take Shea first overall, it's hard to argue. I wouldn't. I would take
Yeah.
Wimby, but I mean, Shea's elite.
It's a Luca or SGA.
I think that comes down to preference.
Yeah.
If you have a strong lean on percentages, like there's some people like in an extremely deep league where you feel like percentages are key, then I would take SGA over Luca if you wanted to. Um, I It's tough to pass up Luca's volume though. That's the only thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no, that's a good point. This is
yeah.
semi on topic. I was offered, I want to hear your thoughts on this because I'm
Okay.
comfortable with what I did, but I was offered, let me see what it was. Chet and the sixth pick for Wemby. This is semi-relevant. Oh, excuse me. Well, no, yeah. Chet and the sixth pick for Wemby earlier, and I said no. Agreed?
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't
The
do
sixth
that.
pick in this upcoming rookie draft,
Yeah.
because I said it's probably going to take a good bit more than Chet, even if Chet's also a top 10 dynasty asset. I have him sixth. If you have Wemby first, like it's not that big of a difference, but I just think
Hmm.
that Wemby's just like one, I'm not going to be able to get him in any other league, so I'm not going to trade him.
Right.
And then two, I think he's just in a tier of his own in comparison to everyone else. But
Yeah.
is SGA, because you said you wouldn't blame anybody for taking SGA, would SGA and Luca and Wemby kind of be your easy top three in Dynasty?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, if someone was really had the injury concern with Wimby, which after seeing all the foot and yoga stuff that we've seen, I don't really know why you would have that. It's not like he's not taking care of himself. Freak stuff
Yeah.
happens, so whatever. But I was trying to think of what it would take on top of Chet to get to Wimby, and I don't. What size league?
30,
Mm,
30 team.
okay. Yeah, I feel like it'd have to be like honestly, like it would kind of have to be like a DeJounte or a Thompson twin or something,
Hmm.
something like borderline top 30, top 40. Like I just think it would have to be a a really significant piece that is both young. I guess DeJounte isn't as young, but like young and like really, really good and really good fantasy game to offset that in a 30 team league. You could argue the depth.
And I think it's also the difference between what would be a quote unquote fair trade and what I'm actually going to want to take back to give up
Right.
Wemby, because I'm not going to give up Wemby in a fair trade. I have to win that trade by a good amount to give up Wemby. Um, but we'll actually get back on track and talk about the Thunder instead of talking about Wemby, which tends to happen when you're talking about
Oh, Chet was involved in
dynasty.
the trade. You're
Dynasty
fine.
basketball. Oh yeah. No, we're good. We're good. Well, my question again was next after we kind of know SGA's top three guy. How do you kind of rank Chet? Like, where would he be going in a startup? You know, I'm assuming you're taking Halliburton above him.
Hmm.
So we'll play the same game from some of the other guys you mentioned. Um, Jason Tatum or Chet? Who you taking first?
It's still Tatum, but uh I'm not as confident about that
Mhm.
as I was like 6 months ago.
Or like 3 games ago, like before this series at all, or is
Well, there's that.
it Chet or LaMelo?
I think I think you have to take Chet just because we don't like LaMelo's injury. I know he's young and the volume is there for him if he ever decides to uh, cut down the turnovers and ever gets a little bit more efficient from the field. But I think I'm just taking
Yeah. Chet or Trey Young?
Chet easy.
Anthony Edwards or Chet?
I'm probably still taking Ant.
Okay, that's fair.
Scotty Barnes and Chet is probably the closest of the group. Scotty Barnes, Tatum, Chet is probably the group there. I'm at a weird place with with that back half of the top 10 of
Yeah,
dynasty assets, because it's a weird group.
it is. I mean, you're having Scotty Barnes in the conversation at like the 6, 7, 8. I have him down at 14. So it's because I have like guys like Kid Cunningham in there, Alperen Şengün in there. Would either of them be in the conversation over Chet, or is it pretty much Chet, Tatum, Scotty Barnes for you? And excuse me, Anthony Edwards as well.
Yeah, I think Cade is probably the closest there. I don't know. I might have an update on that, and dropping LaMelo down out of that tier into the Cade Cunningham type of conversation. But I feel like we just keep waiting for Cade to be what he's supposed to be. And obviously he's still very young, but I just have zero faith in the Pistons. Like, as an organization, Monty Williams as a coach, like even if Cade is as special as it seems like most of us believe he is that going to happen there? And how long do we suffer until it does happen? I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. No, that's entirely fair. I don't think there's any reason for anybody to have any belief in Detroit at this point. Especially because there's already rumors that they might move on from Monty Williams this summer. Like, that's been something that's popped up, which is just why that would even leak this early. It just blows my mind. But we don't have to sit here and just, tear down Detroit. They've been through enough. Jalen Williams, so top 50 guy this year, had a spectacular rookie year. The steals were down for most of the season, still ended up over 1 per game. Honestly, the question is kind of the same that I have for him as it was with Chet and it was with SGA. Like, how early are you taking him in a startup? I guess, like, where do you even have him ranked? Because we did a slow dynasty mock, pretty much as soon as the regular season ended.
Yeah.
And I want to say he went like 24th or 25th. Like, is that too early for you, or is that kind of where you think he should go?
I don't think that that's crazy. I think a guy with his size, and I think he's a guy that you not to say you have to watch, because I hate that argument, but I think when you watch J-Dub, you just see like, oh yeah, that guy makes a lot of sense. Like, that guy makes a ton of sense. And when I see how much the Thunder go to him in crunch time, and how effective that is, and how, like, they have SGA on the team, and they're giving the ball to J-Dub for J-Dub to cook to close some of these games. Like, some of the stuff that he does and some of the ways that he is able to just create for himself, I think top 25 is very reasonable. And for him to be a sophomore and to go from shooting 52% from the field to shooting 54% from the field, and then from shooting 36% from 3 to 43% from 3, and to up his volume from the field from 3, from obviously from 2, and to be as efficient or better, and the same from the line in only another minute. Like, he only played 31 minutes a game this year, and it was at, what was it, 19, 4, 5, 1.1, 0.6. Like, that is a very, very, very good player. And that volume of scoring to continue have that efficiency, and if the steals ever did come back with those numbers with relatively low turnovers too, he's just going to be an absolute fantasy stud. And I can't really argue with anybody taking him top 25 at all.
Yeah, I remember when it happened in that mock, I was like, because it was him and Jalen Johnson back to back, and I was like, what the heck? I was hoping to get those guys next round, but whatever. Like, I get why you're taking him that early, because they're both phenomenal. But it was the first time I had seen them go that early, and it was like, oh,
That's too early for
we're
Jalen
just
Johnson,
here.
if that makes you feel any better.
Really? Okay. So now I'm going to take this opportunity. We're going to talk about the Atlanta
pivot.
You mentioned the Hawk. I'm going to have to pivot. Where do you think he would be going in startups?
About 10 spots later. So it's not crazy, but I haven't seen enough from Jalen Johnson as a creator to the same degree like
Mhm.
we have with Jalen Williams
Yeah.
to be confident in what Jalen Johnson is going to be without a guy like Trae Young and maybe DeJounte Murray creating for him. So this year will be the year that if he's going to crack my top 30, it'll probably be this year, depending on what he looks like more with the ball in his hands. But the Hawks are they're in a fascinating spot too. So a lot to change there for sure.
Yeah, it'll be a fun summer. We'll see what I have like 5, 6 different paths laid out in my head of what they could do, and they're going to do the worst thing possible. Like I'm already like mentally preparing for it, and it's gonna piss me off. But
Yeah.
um Josh Giddey. So I was expecting him to be good this year, and he wasn't. It was really rough, and then really got exposed in the playoffs. It was bad.
hmm
So we're on the same page that this guy's probably not going to be in OKC next year. If there is a scenario where he's traded and he ends up being a starting point guard, I don't know what that looks like or where that would be. But if he's traded and he is a starting point guard, are we expecting him to bounce back? Will just a fresh start help him, and having the ball in his hands more help him? And how good can he be in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think his 2022-23 numbers of 16 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, almost a steal, okay percentages, like good from the field at least. I don't think that that's crazy far off the mark for what he could be if he ends up starting somewhere. I just have some concerns about where that's going to be and like why a team would give the keys to Josh Giddey to run the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure what like and not to keep tossing on the Wizards, but they don't really have a lead ball handler like that. So if Josh Giddey's on the Wizards, eh, like do they feel good about him as their primary ball handler? I I don't know how you can looking at um how bad he was in the playoffs with some elite defenders around him in Shea, J-Dub, Chet, Cason Wallace, Dort. Like they had a lot of guys with a lot of versatility, and he just looked out of place. He looked like he did not belong in playoff basketball, and that just I know some people are more optimistic about that sort of like, oh, we can fix him, which is fine, but it's just one of those things that I have a hard time with valuing that player type in the current NBA, where that sort of vulnerability is exposed immediately.
Yeah, I think he's more of a regular season player where teams
Yeah,
aren't quite as hyper focused on
yeah,
exposing weaknesses. And if he's in a scenario, because also with OKC, they have the ball in SGA's hands, they have the ball in Jalen
yes,
Williams' hands. He's not dominating possessions consistently.
yeah,
So, yeah, if you're leaving this guy that can't shoot and can't defend off the ball, like, no, he's not going to do anything. And it was a
right.
miracle they started him as long as they did. But I don't know where, like most teams in the league have some sort of point guard situation figured out that there's no reason for them to take a chance on Giddey, but maybe a team does if it's really a buy low, but that's probably the only hope
Brooklyn,
for him to bounce back. I was kind of thinking Brooklyn, or if San Antonio wanted to take if we're able to really get a cheap look, but they're gonna be able to get, if they want, 2 point guards in the top 10 or sign somebody else. There's no reason for them to. But
I know. Jazz fans are rather Thunder fans are really hoping that Josh Giddey's enough to get Lauri Markkanen, and I I would just be baffled if that was the centerpiece for a guy like Laurie, even though I think he'd be
Josh Giddey in
phenomenal.
5 firsts
Right. Yeah. I
and
mean, there's
more.
that. But yeah.
Not,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, not many others.
Nope.
Okay.
Your Hawks.
Yeah, that's what we need. Let's keep Trey and DeJounte. Let's
He's way too
add
tall.
Josh Giddey.
He's
That's what we'll do.
he's way too tall to be a guard for the Hawks.
Right, he'll be a forward. We like, yeah,
Fair.
we'll get more guys that can't defend and can't shoot. That's
Nice.
exactly what you need to build around Trae Young. That's wow,
Nice.
beautiful.
That's the way I do it.
It's the way they have been doing it. That's the issue. But Casey Wallace. So he was a guy I really liked heading into the draft last year, and then
Hmm.
hated the situation he got drafted to because I'm like, hey,
Hmm.
they have SGA and they have Josh Giddey, and then it after 1 year, or really even earlier than that, it was kind of like, oh no, wait, this thing is going to really work, and he's going to be a starter one day. It was partially because Josh Giddey just all of a sudden just like it wasn't working, and that was clear in his minutes throughout the season, and especially in the playoffs. I'm assuming he's going to be the starting shooting guard next year. Now, if they end up trading for a guy like Markkanen, maybe that doesn't happen quite yet. Um, Assuming he is eventually a starter for the Thunder, how much upside, specifically in fantasy, does a guy like Casey Moss have?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I know a lot of people were comparing him to Drew Holiday in the draft process, but I think that is mostly from a, oh, look, this guy is a smaller guard that defends bigger and isn't really a point guard, but does a lot of great stuff in winning basketball games, which is awesome. You'll be hard pressed to find a bigger Drew Holiday fan than me. But on the, I think that the hard part about Kaysen is that it's just almost impossible to see him like getting 32 minutes a game with
Right.
this Thunder roster. Like you said, starting shooting guard. So is Dort not there?
Yeah. So, like, assuming in the scenario that they didn't add anybody, and it would be Dort at the 3, J Dub at the 4,
The
Chet at the
four. Okay,
5, with
Chet at the
Casey
five.
at the
Okay,
2.
gotcha.
Basically, just
Yeah,
swapping him and Giddy.
yeah, yeah. Fair. Maybe so. It's tough. So I decided to go through. I was gonna see if there was any indication that I could get on like what Kaysen's fantasy game would be, in a situation that might make more sense for him. And for this year, he played 20 minutes a game, but any game that he was like at 25, he only played a handful of games over 25 minutes. And even in the game where he played more than that, I think he was still under like looking at like 12 points, 3 rebounds, like 2.5 assists with a steal. Like that's just not a great fantasy player, despite me liking him as much as I do, because I think he's just a phenomenal basketball player. And so I say all that to say a guy like that is going to play for a team. Like
Yeah.
whether it's this Thunder team, whether he's in whatever trade to get whatever player, like he is going to play. And I think that his shooting splits for this season um, are enough for me to really buy stock into who he is, even though the circumstances would suggest otherwise.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. I think. Yeah, I think if there is like if they were trading Giddy in a package for Markkanen, Casey Wallace would be the odd man out coming off the bench. But even in a starting role, Josh Giddy was a starter last year playing 24 minutes per game. Is Casey Wallace in an off-ball role playing 24 minutes per game? Is that enough for him to? No, it's not really that much. It would
Yeah,
have to
like
be a larger role and more minutes.
are we looking at like a Kobe White situation up until this year, where it's like, he kind of does some good stuff. He's
Yeah,
not really a true point guard. Like obviously it's a different kind of player because Kobe White is not the defender, but Kaysen also isn't the scorer. So it's like a mirror version. But like, what is that? What does that player look like on this team that has such high aspirations? And I really don't know, but I think I'd be willing to, if you're a not great team in Dynasty, I would be willing to just go buy Case and Wallace around like a top 100, 125, 150 valuation and just wait it out. Like I don't know what the return on investment is there if you get him at the 100 range, but at 150, like if you're turning a vet into Case and Wallace, I'd feel pretty okay about that as long as you had the 2 years that it's probably going to take for that to play out.
yeah, and I think maybe best case scenario is he continues to improve as a shooter, and the steals just come because he's
Yeah.
playing more minutes. and maybe he's a guy that's a steal and a half and 2 threes per game, and that's approaching top 100 value.
Jalen
Probably
Suggs
be
type build.
Yeah, something like that. Where I guess was a point guard coming out of college, but kind of moves into an off-ball role. It's actually like a really good comp. I like that.
Yep.
But it's time to talk about your Pacers, which is, I kind of wanted to say like just run wild and I'll just listen, but we'll have a little bit more structure to it. They went 47-35, finished 6th in the East, lost in the conference finals to Boston after beating the Knicks and the Bucks in the first 2 rounds. They have 3 second rounders this year, 36, 49, and 50. I said they're an ascending contender because they were on the cusp this year. Obviously ran into this unreal Boston Celtics team. But they're on their way there. Like they have the pieces. They have a bunch of young guys that are playing well, developing well. My question I want to start with, because I know you're going to hate it, so I'm just going to start off by saying that this isn't what I believe, but I have to pose the hypothetical of, obviously they ran into an injured Bucks team in round 1, competed with the Knicks, and then, had a historical shooting game, game 7 to beat them in round 2. There's an argument to call it just a fluke run. However, like I get it. It's who they played. It's the path that was set in front of them. What makes you believe that, hey, okay, sure, whatever the path was how they got there, whatever. This is still going to be a very good team moving forward. It wasn't just like, oh, it's a one and done thing.
Yeah, I think only 41 games of Pascal Siakam in this season. That's a really, really big point. For a Pacers team who is not good defensively to add such a big, literally, but also like a big addition to the rotation, at 32 minutes a game, like that's just significant. But really the thing for me, I mentioned it towards the open, was that this run happened without Mathurin or Walker involved at all, even a little bit. Like I think Jarris Walker played in total, he played averaged 3.4 minutes, and I think I think it was like the sum of the minutes was like under 20. Just absurd. But I think that is one of the things to give all of the optimism, is the difference to me between the runs that the Hawks had and the run that the Blazers had a couple of years ago, is that the Pacers already made their, like if you want to look at it in crawl, walk, run, they kind of already made the move to go from walk to run in Siakam, right? Like the Hawks they just like ended up in that place. Like they didn't make an all-in move to improve in that season. It just sort of happened and they were there, and then they ran it back, and then they made a move. And so it's like it was really late. And then the Blazers were in mediocrity forever, and then all of a sudden, like they got their heads caved in by Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday in the playoffs, and then randomly ended up in the conference finals. So I think that those two have a lot more of a fluke nature to them, because I think the Pacers have a lot more young talent on the team than what either the Hawks or the Blazers did. And I think that their young talent, that like the assets that they have, weren't really involved in the playoff run. So if you want to consider the depth and like trajectory arguments of it, I think that is where I have some optimism, even though I'm sure you're about ready to say that, Cam Reddish is better than any prospect on the Pacers besides
In my
Tyrese
heart.
Halliburton. Yeah, right. In all of the Hoopers' heart. Big Cam Reddish believer over here as well. So I have to poke fun at myself. But I just think this team has it's kind of hard to quantify. It seems like they have an unshakable identity, even outside of Halliburton with McConnell, which is super weird. And it's taken me forever to rationalize that in my head. It's like, why is TJ McConnell so important to this team? It's like, wow, TJ McConnell is so important to this team. But yeah, that was a long rant, but I don't think it's a fluke, but I also don't think it should be expected to happen again, like I said.
I mean, I totally agree that I don't think it was I think the path was fluky. I don't think that the
Yes.
Pacers are a fluky team
Yes.
because I've been running this hypothetical past like the last 4 podcast guests I've had. So anybody who's listening has probably heard this before, but the scenario and like the way that the standings played out. So the Pacers
Yeah.
were 47 and 35, obviously tied with the Sixers and Magic. Cavs were 48 and 34, just one game.
Yep.
Had that been switched around, flipped, whatever, where Pacers are in that 4-5 matchup and like the Cavs are sixth or
Well,
something
because the
like that.
Cavs tanked. They tanked that last game, I think, to
They
stay out
did.
of
So I guess
Boston.
they could have,
Yeah.
yeah, because they could have been two. I think, yeah, there was a chance that they were two.
They
They
could
were,
have
or
been
no,
2. They could have been 3. I think 3 was very much in play for them,
yeah.
and they
Oh, and there
wanted
was
Orlando.
also they were also trying to avoid the Sixers. That's what it was. Because I was thinking, I
Right.
was like, no, they're going to avoid yeah. So had the Cavs ended up being one game worse, and they ran into like who somebody else ran into an injured Bucks team in the first round, like JB Bickerstaff may still have a job, and
Right.
it could have been the Cavs in the conference finals. But I agree that the Pacers are built for long-term success, like you mentioned. No Matherin and no Jarris Walker, just because he wasn't ready for minutes, or I guess they just didn't feel he was ready for minutes. Um, but guys like TJ McConnell, Aaron Neesmith was, I mean, I know you've been on him for the longest, but a guy that he really stepped up, has broken out for the Pacers. Even, I mean, younger guys like Isaiah Jackson still there, still waiting on him to break out. Ben Shepherd, I mean, you can go down the list of the young guys. So I had to pose the hypothetical, but just so just so you know, like I do believe in the Pacers, but with Tyrese Halliburton, we'll talk about the actual fantasy part of it now. Um, Obviously, pre hamstring injury, he was the most. I mean, I want to say the most popular guy in basketball, but I felt like he had more hype around him than pretty much anybody else in the league.
Yeah.
And then he hurt his hammy, and then he just wasn't really the same player, at least production wise.
Yep.
And then for a while, just like on the court, obviously. And then I guess heading into next year, should we expect him to be back to that pre hamstring injury production level?
Yeah. I mean, he's said it that he came back
Yeah.
a little bit earlier than he should have to get that 65 game mark, which worked out for him because he got an extra $40 million. So
Yeah.
like that, I mean, that did it. But I think that you could just tell in the way that he played. He was there were flashes of it, of course, but he was so passive for so many stretches that were just it was just not the same. It was just not the same. I don't think he trusted himself to finish. Like if you watch the Boston series specifically, but the Knicks, he was doing it a lot too. He would get by his defender and he would do a jump pass like in the mid range. Like it wouldn't be, he wasn't even a threat to get to the rim and score at all. And I think that that is the one thing that you saw early in the season with Halliburton is it was just as much about him getting to the like he was hitting step back and like that was his shot, but he was getting to the rim as well. And I'd be curious. I wonder if I could pull it up. Probably not while we talk, but what his rim attempts were like versus like after the hamstring injury. So I'm personally, and I've said this to a couple people, I'm not saying that, MVP level player Tyrese Halliburton is the standard because he was in that
Yeah.
conversation before he hurt his hamstring.
100%.
And like, I think, you know, to me, it was quite funny to have Halliburton and Brunson go against each other because Brunson in the second half of the season was doing what Halliburton was doing in the first half of the season, uh, just with a lot more flopping. But it's and so like just don't forget about that. Like don't I don't believe our eyes deceived us. I don't believe that the stretch that the Pacers were having when Halliburton was healthy and the numbers that he was putting up and the joy that the team was playing with and the ability that they had to beat anybody on even any given night. I don't think that was a fluke either, just as much as the Pacers' entire season.
Yeah. And Also, so I guess we haven't really seen a healthy Tyrese Halliburton play with Pascal Siakam yet. And that's obviously another factor that I would imagine gives you plenty of confidence as a fan that, hey, like we're gonna be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of kinks to work out there, and I think the thing with the Pacers as a whole is there were a lot of times where you would forget Pascal Siakam was on the floor, which is hard to do for an all-star level player. Like he would like, oh shoot, that's Siakam out there. It's like he hasn't touched the ball on offense in 4 possessions. What are we doing? So I think that there's a lot of that'll get ironed out, and I think I think some people when Siakam came over, it's like, oh, this will hurt Halliburton. No, no, it won't. Like Halliburton
Yeah.
runs everything, and he spreads the ball around so much, and they play at his breakneck pace, and that is what's going to cement his value. I don't think there's a single player that could come in and really impact Halliburton in a way that's realistic for the Pacers to get.
Yeah. No, that's I mean, yeah, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head that would or that would make sense to them to add because he's just so good with the ball in his hands.
Yep.
On the slideshow, I have the key pieces, which I have Miles Turner in there, and I don't have Pascal Siakam. It's not because I forgot Siakam was a Pacer. It's just because I wanted to include the younger guys that have a little bit more to talk about as opposed to Siakam because we just kind of know what he is. We really kind of know what Miles Turner is within this offense as well. They're more established players. But with Matherin, I know that your comp for him through advanced stats has been Jaylen Brown. Is that still a thing? I haven't asked you in a while. Okay, so it's not
No.
not a thing. So what's the comp now?
Yeah. I don't really know. So the thing with Jalen, and I said this, I used that statistical comp as a credit to Jalen, not
Hmm,
as a, oh, here's what Benedict Matherin's going to be, because I
right.
don't think Matherin's anywhere near the athlete that Jalen Brown was while he was putting up those kinds of numbers, and the size difference is just there. Like I think it's like 20 pounds and a couple inches. So it's like that's a very different player between you're a forward versus just a wing. Um, I think that it would not surprise me at all if Matherin ended up in that list that we were talking about, where hey, how many players played 30 minutes a night and averaged about an assist and a half? Because last year he was at 28 and a half minutes for 1.5 assists. I I really wish he was healthy to play in the playoffs because I just would have loved to see what he can do there. I don't know how he fits into what I just watched in this playoff run, though. Like the scoring burst off the bench would have been great, but if you're like, are you going to take minutes from Nimhard and Neesmith and McConnell? Are you going to pull like I don't know. Matthew would have to take some steps defensively to argue any of that. And if you're looking for a natural pivot, like take those minutes, take Neesmith's minutes, turn them into someone else that can do kind of the scoring thing while also doing kind of the defense thing. And there's your natural upgrade as a player-based package rather than picks-based. And so I don't I think a I don't you can't really use like a Michael Porter Jr. type comparison for Matherin because it's just such a different player. But for Jalen and Matherin, I think the key there is just the physical drives and the tools to do so many different things. It's just a question of if, not when.
Yeah, and I guess just looking at his numbers and what I kind of have as the image of who Matherin is in my head. Do you think he has the makings of a player that's going to make, I guess, a big 9 cat impact? Like I think he can score enough to be valuable in points leagues and maybe chip in a little bit here and there to increase the value just because he's on the floor. But I mean, this year, 14 and a half points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, about half a steal, not really anything with blocks, low field goal percentage. Like, is he going to grow into a player that is borderline top 100, or is he going to be a points league guy? Like I don't, not direct comparison, but as far as statistical output, like an RJ Barrett, where he's like, yes, he's scoring a lot of points, but he's bad in category leagues.
I think RJ Barrett was the name that I was tossing around.
Okay.
I still really like RJ Barrett, so I don't think even that. But I think that that's probably about where we're at. The efficiency is a little bit different, so I'm not sure how like where that comes into play. But I also don't know if Mathurin ever gets that 36 minutes a game that RJ got for 3 straight years under Tibbs. So um, it's really tough. It's really tough to see what that path is because there's just not a lot of guards who are scoring, who need to score that much to have that much value, that don't do anything on the defensive end really. And you know, of those options, like how many of them are on teams that are set up like the Pacers are with the depth that they have at the shooting guard slash small forward positions, because Ben Shipperd earned playoff rotation minutes, and it's going to be tough for him to find time in the rotation, let alone a guy like Mathurin who really stands out when he plays, and it's not always a great thing. It's because he doesn't fit in with what they do.
Yeah. The other guy you mentioned that wasn't part of the playoff run that is part of the future is Jarris Walker, who barely played at all as a rookie just because this was a competitive team. I think he spent a good bit of time in the G League, if I'm not mistaken. Where do we kind of see him looking like? I mean, and within the next few years when he's a more established rotation or even starting player in the league, I guess how much upside? Because I know it was kind of like either him or Taylor Hendricks that the Pacers were going to end up with. I know you were a Hendricks guy, and I'm assuming still are a Taylor Hendricks guy, but also still a believer in Jarris Walker as well.
Yeah, Walker's tough because I think that what he like the ideal version of him, I know a lot of people talk like Draymond, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the passing, the defensive versatility and all that stuff. And that's great, except I think Chad Buchanan just has his season ending presser and they talked about him more as a three. And Jarris Walker as a three next to Pascal Siakam and Miles Turner and Tyrese Halliburton, like that makes some sense. But what is Jarris Walker doing other than spacing in that group? Like that's just it's a really, really weird role for a player like him to have. And again, what is Jarris Walker, the prospect, going to bring to this Pacers group that gets him on the floor and makes it impossible for him to take off? Like, is he going to defend and shoot like Neesmith? Maybe he's a different kind of defender, and his shot, he's made a lot of progress on his shot, but that's tough. Is he going to be able to do enough with the ball in his hands with those other guys on the floor where he's like contributing to the offense rather than like, is it worth him having the ball instead of Siakam or Halliburton? No. So what is that? What does that even end up looking like? But for Jarris as a prospect, outside of the context that he's in, he's kind of in a similar role to Case and Wallace, in my opinion, because what Jarris is good at and how he's developing doesn't really mesh with the current team that he's on. And so it's another situation where for Jarris, you're buying at a top 100 value and holding and just seeing what happens. Because if the Pacers end up bringing back Obi Toppin, you're going to have to pay Obi Toppin like decent money, and you're not going to do that and then not play Jarris Walker and then not play him. But Jarris Walker's sitting right there. So it's tough to see where those minutes come from for him.
Yeah, it's not a bad problem for the Pacers to have all this freaking depth, but uh putting you on the spot a little bit here. I know you mentioned a players trade as opposed to a picks trade.
Yep.
The two guys that weren't in the playoff run that are still, I'd say, part of the future, you also just said don't kind of really fit with what the team just did.
Mm-hmm.
If you were making some sort of consolidation trade with Mathurin and Walker and whatever other pieces or picks you want to attach to it, who is a player in your mind that you would say, okay, he would fit flawlessly with this team and get us to the next level where, I mean, you would have Halliburton, Siakam, Miles Turner, and potentially another star-ish to star level player.
Yeah, I mean, there's my answer, and my answer is almost always Jaden McDaniels. Um,
I love that. There's no reason for you to trade Matherin and Jarris Walker for Jaden McDaniels. Like I would feel like that's like an overpay value wise. If I'm like
I
unless
don't know that it. I think that is based on what we hoped Matherin would be and what we hope
yeah.
Walker will be, not necessarily factoring in what they are for this Pacers team. Mikal Bridges is the obvious other name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I, to
Trey
me, I'm sorry.
Trey Murphy as well.
Oh yeah. Let's just go down Patrick Williams. Let's just get all my guys lined up real quick. But no, like those are the kind of guys that Michael Porter Jr. would be okay. I don't think the
Yeah.
defense is there for that necessarily, but that size of shooting you can't really argue with. I think that's my overall point with the Pacers is what they have is awesome, and what they're missing is almost impossible to get, and that's why I probably would have taken Hendricks instead of Walker, because this like Hendricks just fits, like the shot and the defense just plays wherever. Like he doesn't need the ball to be good, and we were banking on Jarris being a shooter to be able to unlock him, and now you have Pascal Siakam, and now Jarris Walker has to be a 3, and I don't really know how viable that's going to be. So now you're going to try to trade and find somebody who does what Taylor Hendricks does. So, yeah, it's Herb Jones would be fantastic. Good luck with that. Denny Avdia is a weird. He's kind of a Siakam-ish kind of player, but I don't know. It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. Backtracking on Jaden McDaniels, those two prospects for McDaniels, I don't think that's something Minnesota would do because of where they are as a team. But I also think if they were, say, like more of a tanking team that had McDaniels that was able to get 2 recent top 10 picks, that makes sense value wise. But I think, yes, because of maybe where they are as a team, that trade probably wouldn't make much sense. But
there is
maybe
a
it's
trade
something
that
else.
does make sense, and it's Andrew Nimhard, Aaron Nesmith, and one of Matherin and Walker.
For Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah, I think so. I've had this conversation a lot. I think that if you are able to give Minnesota Nesmith as a cheaper replacement, and then they get a Matherin or a Walker, that Minnesota considers it. I think that Minnesota should be all over trying to get Nimhard as a Conley replacement. And then if you get a Nimhard and a Walker, plus the money is where it gets super weird between Nesmith or McConnell as matching salary, but I think Nimhard is the target there. And that is what's going to be so fascinating, because I think it was Mark Stein had that Nimhard Pacers are planning on getting an extension for him this summer, which is eyebrow raising considering their financial constraints now that Halliburton is a supermax and Siakam's coming up on a max contract and Miles Turner is going to be an unrestricted free agent next year and Benedict Matherin's going to be an extension eligible next year. Obi Toppin's a free agent. Isaiah Jackson's extension eligible. There's a lot of money coming down the pipe for this Pacers team. So for them to extend Nimhard and take him off the trade table too is pretty interesting after the playoff run he just had against the Celtics.
Yeah, that is interesting because the notes I had down were he just had an elite playoff run and he's on a team-friendly contract for 2 more years. I think it's like about $2 million a year until 2026. So, and an extension now is a little bit interesting, but I guess good for them for wanting to give him money as soon as he just played as well as he did. But I can't imagine, like, I think he's a very good player, but he's not. What did he have? 32 in that last game. Like that's not the guy you're wanting to rely on to drop 30 in a playoff game.
No, it's not.
How does he fit? How does he fit in with this team? Or do you think? I guess I didn't even consider, potentially a trade. But if he's ended up traded, in your example, to Minnesota, where he's a Conley replacement, is eventually a starter, how much fantasy upside is there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Actually, let me back up. I am sure that the way Nimhard shot the ball against the Celtics is not real, because that's 4 games and he shot 54% from the floor and 48% from 3. But I think that a player averaging 21 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists on 54, 48, 89 shooting against Drew Holiday, Jalen Brown, Derek White, Jason Tatum, like, yes, not real. However, not something to ignore either, because
No.
that, like, and the way that he was doing it, the way where he was getting to his spots and all that stuff, and some of the big time shots he hit even when Halliburton was healthy, I think that this is a guy who likely should be a starting guard in the league. Um, and that to me is not something that you can say about a lot of guys um, that can do what Nimhard can do on both sides of the ball, with or without the ball, on or off the ball defensively. For the playoffs as a whole, 33 minutes a game, a lot of these games with Halliburton, 15 points, 3.5 boards, 5.5 assists on 56, 48, 77% shooting. Again, the shooting is absurd. Like, we can toss that out a little bit, but it's also hard to ignore, you know? He's he's a he's just a very impactful two-way player, and that is something that every team needs, just like what we're talking about with Case and Wallace.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, he's very good. Obviously, we're not expecting him to score as much, but I think, like you said, both ends of the floor, him and Aaron Nesmith were, I think, doing a lot of the perimeter defense throughout the playoffs.
Yep.
Yeah, like his upside a good bit. Anybody else on the Pacers that we want to talk about before we close this out?
There's not much left on the Pacers, honestly. I think one thing I will say, watch what the Pacers do with that pick 36.
Mm.
Because if there is a player consolidation talent upgrade move, that player at 36, hopefully Ryan Dunn from Virginia, will come in and be the only, like, Pacers young player that they have that's like ready to jump in and contribute if they needed to, right? Um, and then beyond that, Ben Shepherd, shout out to him, earned those minutes. Isaiah Jackson, you said you're waiting for him to break out. Couldn't agree more. But I think if you are going to try to buy Isaiah Jackson, you need to do it in the next like 2 weeks, because as soon as extension season comes up, I think Isaiah Jackson probably gets something done. And I think that Jalen Smith will not be on the Pacers. And Isaiah Jackson, as the locked in backup, is going to be the grounds for the breakout that I think we've kind of been hoping for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. Is like, so Ryan Dunn may be I don't want to say my favorite prospect in the draft, but in like relative to where other people have him ranked,
Yeah.
I have him significantly higher.
Yeah.
Is he like he's a really good defender that can't shoot? Like, this is your archetype, right?
This is my guy. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
So if he's there at 36, I'm going to be, one, upset, two, happy for
hmm
you,
hmm
because yeah, I think he's unreal.
I'll
But
finally get a big wing that can defend and not shoot. It'll be great.
it'll be perfect. Let's see. The few teams ahead of him, I'm looking at, just Tankathon has him going 31st, so that'd be bad for you if he just
After we
went 5
passed on
picks
Leonard
before.
Miller and Gigi Jackson last year to end up, I mean, Ben Shepherd did do well, but they traded out of all those picks to not get those big boys.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this has Brian Dunn 31, and then you guys get Justin Edwards at 36 on Tankathon. So that's
could be
not ideal.
worse. Yeah, him getting past the Raptors at 31 is is a tall order, I would say, because this is a Raptors player through and through with absolute defensive chaos and absolute zero on the offensive end. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, maybe they'll trade up after trading down last year. They'll trade up this year and be able to get Ryan Dunn.
I think it's quite possible, considering I don't want to say disposable, but the extra young players that they have and the value that I think is going to be there in this draft as a whole, from like 20 to 40. I think there's just a lot of really, really good players, and I think I can see a lot of teams falling in love with guys that end up causing some movement.
Yeah. Well, we will be watching out for that in a little over 2 weeks. Before we go, Rhett, thanks for joining me. Do you have any content coming up? I know you said life's been busy, but with the Round Ball Rhetoric podcast, anything coming up?
Yeah, I've got the Round Ball Rhetoric Patreon. I've been fairly inactive for a little while as life has just one thing. I delivered my fourth kid in my car, like in the passenger seat of my car. So yeah, that is the
Wow.
epitome of how. And then I was back to work 24 hours later. So with the other three kids and all this, so like that's the epitome of how crazy life is. We are moving in 48 hours, just about. Um, Flying across the country with all these kids and dog and stuff. So like it's chaos. But I have a new dynasty rankings update ready to go. Just got to put that out there, and then we'll get back to it after I can exhale for the first time in like 9 months.
Unreal that you're still going to be able to get dynasty rankings out there. That's incredible. Props to you. Please do the man a favor. Go check out his rankings if you weren't going to already. Rep, before we get out of here, again, with your incredibly busy life and schedule and everything's going on, thank you for joining me for this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Noah.
Yeah. And so that's going to do it for this episode of the Tank Me Later podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I will see you next time.
You just listened to another episode from the Fantasy Basketball International Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us. And for more information about joining our community, please check out our website at fbibasketball.com.